Shiva. Composure. I have so many feelings about this episode that in order to turn them into coherent thoughts, I had to give myself over 4 pages of guidelines. Yay! Shiva raked in a total of 22.86 million viewers, which is not only the high for the season, but the high for all 10 seasons. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, in their 10th season, NCIS is still pulling in series highs for viewers. I'm so proud! So the amount of time between where Shabbat Shalom ends and where Shiva starts is unclear, but I think we're supposed to assume it's the next day. We start out with a flashback, and not only do we see Ziva and Eli, but we also see the silhouettes of Ari, Tali, and Ziva's mother. Does Ziva's mother have a name? I keep seeing people call her Rivka. I keep checking the NCIS databases, and it says nothing about that. Did they ever officially give her a name, or did the fandom just collectively decide on a name one day? Another thing, Ari appears to be like 7 years old in this silhouette. If Ziva's 13 in this flashback, wouldn't Ari be well into his late teens and possibly his early 20s? Anyway, we see a young Ziva singing Shabbat prayer, and Gabby Cosio's voice is stunning. I started looking up some of her singing performances, but all I could see was Ziva up there rocking out on stage. I'm like, go Ziva. But seriously, she's incredibly talented, so I'll put some of her links in the sidebar. You should check those out. P.S. Phenomenal casting on both young Ziva and young Eli. As she continues singing, we transform from 13-year-old Ziva to... Oh my god, how old is Ziva now? How old is Ziva? So she's in the synagogue and we hear her praying and she's asking why she shouldn't be angry. And it's actually very, very similar to a scene we saw with Tony in Engaged. Ziva asks for a sign she shouldn't lose hope. And then there's Tony! Have you guys noticed they do this thing pretty often? I was watching Knockout last night, and Tony's talking to this woman in an elevator, and you know, he's talking about how he's in this slump ever since he broke up with Jean. And the woman's giving him all these steps to recover and getting out of his little slump with women. Then Tony asks what the last step is, and the lady says, choose the right woman. And then the elevator opens, and bam, there's Ziva, and if that's not a sign, I don't know what is. Oh wait, that's right, the holy powers coming together to bring Tony to the synagogue. This is also the start of what I will further refer to as Husband Tony. So Husband Tony admits that he had McGee track down Ziva, and he says that he wants whatever she wants and whatever she needs. We also get to meet NCIS Deputy Director Jerome Craig, and a lot of people, and myself included, went in expecting to hate this guy, and he's actually a pretty fantastic character. He can be awkward and hilarious and this really caring, sweet guy, but he can also get really bold and can lay down the law. He seems like a really cool guy, and I hope we see more of him. Now, when I say I hope we see more of him, what I mean is I hope we see more of him as the good guy, and you know, he's continuing to breathe. Then we get a scene in the bullpen where Tony tells Gibbs that Ziva went home to shower, and Gibbs asks why he let her go. My shipper senses are tingling. We have another shipper in our midst. We also see Ducky give a heartfelt goodbye to Jackie, and even Gibbs notices that Ducky seems really torn up about this, and he asks Ducky how he's doing, and it's so perfect. Gibbs and Ducky are such good friends, and I love their relationship with each other. We also find out that Gibbs planted a tracking device in Cosme's coat pocket. Wow, you go, Techno Gibbs! I would recommend other technology like a computer that wasn't around before I was, but we won't push it for now. So Gibbs confronts Cosme like a boss and brings him back to NCIS interrogation. We also get a scene of McGee, Gabriella, Adele, and poor third wheel Denozo in MTAC. Gabriella gives them information about a pro-Palestinian group run by a billionaire who had it out for Eli. Gabriella definitely has the hots for McGee, aka the McFever. Pay attention to the fact that Tony says, if you don't pounce on that hot Israeli action, I will never forgive you, instead of, if you don't, I will. Maybe because he's realizing he has some hot Israeli action and pounce on himself, I don't know. We get a scene of Ziva down in autopsy, and she's in front of the door where her father is, and Ducky offers to let her see the body, and she refuses. And then Gibbs comes down with Tony. We also see Ziva try and convince Gibbs to let her get some revenge, a request which Gibbs not so delicately denies. She's also not allowed back in her home, which means La Casa de Denozo. Also, another tiny thing that I would like to point out, when Ducky says people who love and admire you have matters at hand, the camera not so subtly shifts over to Tony. Coincidence? I think not. Check Gibbs' rules. Coincidences are apparently not a thing. They also bring the billionaire into interrogation, and Vance bursts in the room full of anger, and he actually has to be restrained by Denozo, and then Deputy Director Jerome Craig comes in and lays down the law and is like, you're out of here, buddy. Then we meet Alain Badnar, who we've known this guy for about 10 seconds and he already seems like an enormous pain in the behind. Badnar is the deputy director of Mossad and he makes a remark about wanting answers and Ducky tells him to take a number and then Badnar says, excuse me, whose grandfather are you? Then Donald Ducky, the sass master Mallard, goes, well, that depends, who's your grandmother? And then you get an ice pack to apply to the burn. So then Ziva and Tony go to Tony's apartment, and I would just like to pause and take a minute to assess just how badly Tony wants her to stay. He talks about his movie collection and how there's some great takeout down the street, and then if that wasn't enough, he brings her Shamil, the man of steel. When she hugs Shamil, you can definitely see the gratitude on her face, and Tony's just so glad to see her honestly happy. Later that night, we also see the return of husband Tony, who coincidentally can't seem to sleep. So he's walking around and he opens his fridge and then he begins to hear little baby kitten whimpers of distress. And so he goes to investigate. This scene makes my heart melt too much, so excuse me if I start fangirling, screaming and squealing and flailing, just pardon that. So he goes to check on Ziva and it turns out she's having a nightmare. We're basically watching fan fiction come to life. So he walks in the room and he sits down on the bed and he wakes her and she pops up screaming, stop, and he goes, it's okay, it was just a bad dream, and then she goes, no it's not, and she falls back on the pillow, and then he grabs her hand and he puts it between his hands and he's trying to comfort her, and then she pats him on the shoulder and is trying to convince him that she's fine, but he knows she's not fine. And so then she says, Tony, leave me alone, and he looks so torn and so sad because he just wants to make her feel better. And then she rolls over on her side and Tony reluctantly leaves the room, and he decides because he thinks it's better for her right now, and then she turns over and she totally knows something just happened, and I tried to contain it. I can't. I'm sorry. I need a moment. Then we get a scene of Vance meeting up with Gibbs, and poor Vance has nothing but anger and vengeance and sadness in his heart. He asks Gibbs whether it's worth it to take revenge, and all Gibbs does is simply look at his children, and the message is clear. When Gibbs went out to take revenge, he had nothing to lose. His mother was dead, he hadn't spoken to his father in years, no siblings, and then his wife and daughter had just been murdered. But Vance still has his children to take care of. I also believe this is one of the big reasons why Gibbs did not support Ziva's revenge, because he sees a bright future for her with family and friends. Speaking of Ziva, Tony catches Ziva trying to email some of her friends back in Israel, and this is where he gets real with her. He says he's been thinking about how to protect her. He says he's been thinking about a lot of things. Was this an incredibly blatant yet subtle hint at Tiva, or is that just me? They get into this fight and Tony gives her this big verbal wake-up call, which I really think is her turning point for the episode. Over at NCIS, Abby finds these Russian bullets, which were smuggled in by an Iranian, and after this long, complicated chain of evidence, Gibbs and Craig believe that Cosme is innocent, which infuriates Badnar. Next we cut to a shot of Ziva folding clothes or towels or something in Tony's kitchen. And then just for a second, it's like it's her home too. I'm going to link you guys to a post I'm about to address that I saw on Tumblr, but it basically talks about how Ziva turns Tony's cold, unwelcoming apartment into an actual home. Tony's such a lonely guy, and I guess his house really symbolizes that. But when Ziva comes in, there's towels laying around, and there's sheets messed up, and there's people using a laptop, and there's things happening in the kitchen, there's things happening all around the house. And it's the same thing when Tony's father was there. It just shows that he needs people, because when there are people around, Tony's little solitary cave turns into this domestic space. For that little rant, I believe we were talking about Badnar, and he video chats Ziva, and this guy is a grade A sleaze the entire time. He's not only annoying, but he's also very threatening and creepy. At the end, he talks about how Ziva knows that he'll find her. This guy is just insanely creepy. Anywho, McGee, who's been pretty absent during this episode except for his active role as Israeli boy toy, finds out that the man who shot Jackie and Eli left a large sum of money to his wife under the account labeled Virtue. And after some consultation with Ziva, they realize that Virtue translates into Tuhar, which is also Badnar's middle name. Tony and Gibbs rush over to find a paranoid Ziva. Then we proceed with one of my favorite exchanges out of the entire episode.
Could have knocked.
I live here.
Yeah, we almost died here too.
So then Cosme's free to go, and he's in a car, and he says, I'll be home soon. And then his car blows up, which was really sudden yet completely expected at the same time. Then we get the scene. I love how Shamil said he talked to the flight attendants, and he gave her father pretzels because he didn't like peanuts. Shamil is legend. And then he says, looks like someone's here to see you off. And then Ziva turns around and we see husband Tony, who brought her magazines and gum because she always forgets them when she flies. Remember last week when I asked how much more canon they could be without actually becoming a canon couple? I think we just got our answer. They talk about her father and her family, and Tony pleads with her not to seek revenge. And Ziva says that she's just going to a funeral, and Tony believes her. Ziva is obviously about to say something. She starts. She says, Tony, but she never finishes her sentence. It's clearly not, Tony, I like your shirt, or Tony, I will see you soon. She was clearly going to say something with substantial significance, or else she would have finished saying it. Was she going to say, Tony, I love you? I guess we'll never really know. Tony urges her on, but she's crying and her walls crumble down, and she throws herself into Tony's arms for a big hug. And then Tony whispers something in Hebrew in her ear, and she smiles and says, I know, and walks away.
That's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. But what did he just say?
Then we begin what will go down in NCIS history as the Great Atlo Levad Hunt. Suddenly, everyone everywhere is desperately searching to see what this means. Everyone's searching for a translator, everyone's searching for someone who speaks Hebrew, everyone's in a panic. Finally, someone translates it, and it turns out that Atlo Levad means that you are not alone. Some people were disappointed by this, they expected him to say, I love you. But after all her loss, Tony has finally told her that she's not alone. She'll always have someone to fall back on. He'll always be there for her, and she can always come back to him, which I think was the perfect I love you for this scenario. It was still a huge step forward, and I think I love you would have been a little inappropriate for this situation. There was also this really long, tense 5 seconds between where Ziva said, Tony, I, and the hug, where no one was sure if she was going to kiss him or not. And I was trying to emotionally prepare myself. I'm like, and then she launches herself in for a hug, and we're like, The ending sequence was just pure and sorrowful and beautiful and optimistic. Finding out that the song playing in the background was called You Are Not Alone was just the icing on the cake. All in all, Shiva was an amazing episode. It was so beautiful and so well done. Definitely one of my favorites. We have a 2-week hiatus before the next episode called Hit and Run premieres. I'll probably post a spoilers and theories video someday next week. Also, there's an upcoming episode with a title that has me unrealistically hyped. So I cannot wait to discuss that with you guys. I'm very excited. I hope you guys take advantage of the break to take a few breaths to calm down, just so we can get excited again. That was Shiva, absolutely incredible, and I will see you guys for Hit and Run.